Right. Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Pam Bracy, and I'm just excited to have you all here with us. And as Joe said, hopefully some other people will be chiming in shortly. We are going to be discussing business education related to teaching standards and current certification policies. And this is really going to be informal. So I really want to encourage you all to give any kind of input that you would like to give. The whole point in this is for us to see as an organization what role we should play in the credentialing system related to business ed. And so I'm a former business ed teacher, educator, and I had a teacher prep program. And so I've seen it on all sides. I also taught middle school and high school. I've worked for the alternative side as well. So I've done both worlds. And so I know the pros and cons of each, but as far as where we stand now, we want to know as an organization, what we should be doing or what the body believes that is needed in order for us to play an integral role in making sure that our profession marches on in a great way. And so I am the director for the Council of Business Teaching and Research, and also the director to the MBEA board for that council. And so, as I said before, I'm delighted to have you all here today. We're going to hear from Dr. Christina Force, who's going to talk to us a little bit about Power Mega Pi and some other things that she's noticed happen in business ed. And then we're going to hear from our executive director, Joe, and he's going to give us some updates. And then after that, we're just going to have an informal discussion. I have a few guiding questions so that we can kind of talk about where we think we should be. Okay. And so I just wanted to show you all who our current council members are on the Council for Business Teaching and Research. And you have myself, you have Tom May, Sandra McFarland, Michelle Taylor, Anna Bello, Cyril Keston, and then of course our president and executive director. And so if any of you are interested in being a part of that council, please reach out to me. We do have a few vacancies that I would love to fill and would love to have you on board. So if you're interested in being a part of a national council, please let me know. We would love to have you involved. I also want to say thanks to our institutional members. If these are one of your institutions, thank you so much. If not, we would love for you to get your institution to become a member. And, let us, if you have questions about how to do that, reach out to us. And so at this time, I know she has to go, so I don't want to prolong it. I'm going to ask Dr. Force if she would give us her update, not only on Power Mega Pi, but what else she's seeing happen in our sector right now.
Thanks, Pamela. And thanks for having me tonight. Welcome, everybody. So I guess 4 or 5 years ago, I was asked to join the Pi Omega Pi National Council. I was very excited to do that. I've been at Bloomsburg University in the role of, I'm currently a professor of business education and I supervise student teachers. And I am, well, I guess I was the advisor of our Alpha Delta chapter of Pi Omega Pi. And so going on board with Pi Omega Pi, I had probably been an advisor for about 5 years. And when I was asked to come on board, I definitely said yes, because I did have at that time, a large number of students who were members, and we're very excited about it. We still participated. They had the competition. So we did that, I think, twice. We have our biennial meetings. So we did participate in that competition twice. So when I was asked to come on board, I said yes. And the year that I joined, we were also looking for a student rep. And I had a wonderful student rep, shout out to Nicholas Laudenslager, and he came on board. So upon agreeing to that, shortly I found out that the current leadership, the current president and the board had discussed the closure of Pi Omega Pi. And anybody hates to come on board and be the president that closes Pi Omega Pi. That's not something anybody wants to do. Like, oh great, I'm the officer and now let's shut down the organization. And my student, Nicholas Laudenslager, he is really a get-go kind of guy. So he came up with a whole bunch of ideas. We redesigned the website. We did a whole bunch of different things. And then, we had COVID. And so COVID was not very kind to the continuation of Pi Omega Pi. So, that kind of put us really in limbo. So as we kind of progressed, we talked about ideas to get involvement, but every time we turned around, somebody was closing one of their biz ed teacher prep programs. So it dwindled down to the point where the concern was Bloomsburg was active. Two other schools were active. However, one of them closed their program. And so how do you have, a board of two schools constantly being president, treasurer, secretary? There would only be so many people. So it would be Jennifer Anderson and I, would kind of be going back and forth and doing a lot of the work. So, with much thought, unfortunately, even though we had the best intentions, sometimes the best intentions, don't seem to follow through. This summer we discussed, the closure of Pi Omega Pi because the numbers were just so low. And again, why are our numbers low? The numbers were low because there are a lot less business education teacher programs and a lot less traditional ones, right? Where there's like, membership and teachers and a kind of organized path. So we're moving away from that more traditional type of teacher credentialing. So, Jennifer and I decided that it would be best because, I think I had one new member last year. Our undergraduate program has very few enrolled students. However, our graduate program has quite a few. And the thing is with graduate students, a lot of them are parents and have families and jobs. And so they don't really want to be involved in a student organization because they're online as well. So they're all over Pennsylvania. So it makes it very, very difficult to do that. So, we did have some funds and we met with Joe and we are establishing a scholarship with our remaining funds to hopefully promote others that in some form, traditional or non-traditional credentialing, want to be business education teachers, the K through 12 realm to start with. So that is kind of the full circle of Pi Omega Pi. We also, as everybody knows, we were an honor society. So we did pay fees with that. So that was one of the things, I forget how much our yearly fee is, but it wasn't only a fee, it was doing a report. So Jen and I were going to be doing the report like all the time, to submit to keep our honor society accreditation. So I guess that's kind of the story of Pi Omega Pi. I'd love to open it up for questions. If anybody has questions about the organization or what's going to happen now. I did send out a closure letter, but maybe not everybody got it. No questions? And I guess, so my thoughts maybe going forward is to try to do something, hopefully maybe Joe can work something out for young new professional teachers to maybe kind of do something like this, Joe, give them maybe like a Zoom option for some professional development, because we did actually conduct a study on Pi Omega Pi advisors and on Pi Omega Pi students. And, when we did the study, they were all really still interested in professional development. They really wanted to do that. They just didn't want to, have to come somewhere and have the expense and the time of doing that professional development. So hopefully we can kind of continue to do something where we mentor and we foster professional development opportunities for, people who are new to the profession. So I'm hoping that maybe that can, be an outcome as well. Is there anything you want to add, Joe?
Chris, are there any Pi Omega Pi chapters anywhere in the United States right now? Do you know?
There were only two. So Mayan and Jennifer Anderson, she's out of Cedar Falls. So I forget what
okay.
institution is. So just those two.
Okay.
Tamara Davis was the treasurer, and her program closed, and her role has moved towards she's an associate dean, I think. So we were like the last three organizations that were members. And I'm trying to think, somebody retired last year and said that there was going to be somebody there to take over the Pi Omega Pi. That would have been this year, and we had already made the decision to close it. So even with that, it would have only been three chapters, unfortunately. Yes.
Okay,
So
thank you.
Yep.
Well, one of the things we're doing for the new teachers, Christina, as you may know, is that we're working to give new members in their first year a free membership. And then we have something called the New Teacher Survival Guide. And really what it is, it's a really interactive coaching session with a group of teachers. It's not recorded. Barb, you've been there for a few of those, and maybe you would like to tell everybody just a little bit what's going on that. When you talk about teacher credentialing, and that's really what we're talking about tonight, you know, one of the most effective ways from professional development and even some of our non-traditional teacher prep programs we're seeing is the coaching aspect is so effective in being able to have a new teacher paired up with a more experienced one. Well, we don't have a formal program. We do have those events about probably 5 to 6 times a year. Barb, do you want to kind of tell everybody what we've done? And you know,
Sure.
we've added about 30 or 40 members, new teachers through that. We'd love to continue to grow it, especially when they get free memberships for the year. It's a nice way to acquaint them. Barb, what thoughts would you have on what you've seen?
Yeah, so I think it's a great opportunity for those new teachers. Maybe it's their first year out of college. A lot of them all are alternative cert type students that have been business people and now coming into education. But Joe usually leads them through some case studies of what would you do if, and they get to offer their insight. And Joe, myself, whoever happens to be on as a quote veteran teacher also offers some insight, but we give them a chance to ask questions and hope that they develop a rapport that as they go forward, you know, if they have a question that maybe they'll reach out to MBEA, they'll reach out to me, you know, to somebody at least to try to give them some feeling of connection to the group.
I think that's awesome, because I'm finding that our master's program is growing. You know, the numbers are really high in our master's program, and it's basically a lot of people coming out of business and going into the teaching profession. Our program is 30 credits, so it's 10 classes, it's online, and they can be emergency certified, but they eventually go on to PDE has an intern certificate. So they within 1 year, so 2 semesters, we observe them like via video they send in or via Zoom. And it's kind of funny because my son, who was in supply chain management for 5 years, you know, working 6 days a week, 12 hours a day, I had gotten an email from Palmyra Area High School, and they said, you know, we're looking for a teacher. And I said to him, hey, they're looking for a teacher. What do you think about changing careers? And he goes, you know what? I'd like to give a change. He goes, I'd like to do it. So he walked into the classroom, never observed, never had an education course. His first one was with me, which he didn't even have the first class yet. And he had this teaching job. So I think definitely, I mean, so he's lucky because he has mom as a resource, right? But, you know, a lot of people don't have that opportunity. So almost also, I think, which might be great, would maybe be, and get them to stay, is maybe to have like a mentorship. So match up an NBA member with maybe one who's going through a non-traditional credentialing program. And so, you know, provide kind of like more than just the sessions, like, hey, somebody that I can email, I had this situation in my class today, or I'm getting observed in personal finance. Do you have a really good lesson for me? Or do you have some tips? Or my administrator said this, you know, what do you think? What do you think I can do to improve upon that? So, you know, I think a mentoring program where you're like a one-on-one would also be, I think, really beneficial, I think, for both people, because I think someone who's been in the field a long time, right, it kind of rejuvenates you and you know, is very impactful. So
Christina, do your students have to pass a praxis or something like that?
So they do. So they can be emergency certified, and they can switch to the intern track because there's a couple things they have to do to get the intern certificate. One is they have to pass both the biz ed and content area for the Praxis 2. So they don't have to take Praxis 1 if they are have an undergraduate degree in Pennsylvania. We also have to make sure we have an affiliation agreement with the school. If not, that's very easy to get. And then the third thing is just confirmation from the school that they are hired and full-time teaching business ed. We have sometimes people will say, well, they want me to do half-time math and half-time biz ed, but it has to be, full-time business education. So yes, those are the requirements.
If anybody would like to attend one of those, I mean, we have, as you know, at least once a month and really more than that. I mean, every newsletter we have upcoming events. And if you see a new teacher's survival guide, really that is a cue for those of you who are interested in that. Mentoring, I think that's a wonderful idea. Our big challenge with that obviously is the organization of it and getting the volunteers to do it. I've often thought that's a really wonderful idea for some of our retired members. So I have some meetings coming up with some retiree leaders, and we're going to see what we can do there. But hopefully what we're trying to do is be consistent. That's number one. We need a consistent program, and we've started to do that. We have a curriculum, if you will, that we've kind of started to go through. Nothing overly complex, but definitely something thought-provoking that we're trying to do for those new teachers. So that's part of what we've done there. And thanks, I think Elizabeth Diamond and some others have also attended those. So thanks to all of you experienced teachers on this call. And I know most of you are all welcome to come to those. So also too, if you're interested in me reminding you of those events specifically, I usually have a short list of teachers that I say, hey, we've got a group of people coming in tonight that are all new. Would you like to come? If you'd like that, you can drop your name in the chat or send me an email at joe@nbea.org. Pamela?
Yeah, Joe, I teach my classes on Monday night, so we'll just make one of those sessions a class.
We never do them. Yeah, well, we never. Well, if you tell us it's a Monday night, we'll make it on a Monday night. Usually we're on Wednesdays or Thursdays just because we like to be consistent. But if you're on a Monday, tell me what Monday night it is, and we'll bring people all in and we'll do it virtually.
Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, we'd love that. All right, Pamela, we ready for whatever's next on your agenda?
Yes, well, at this point, I want to give you all a few questions just to start thinking about, and then we're going to hear from Joe. He's going to walk us through a few things. But while he's doing that, I want you all to start thinking. We're going to have a discussion when he gets done. And I would really love to know what you all think about any indicators or factors that you all see happening in business ed, teacher prep programs that we need to be aware of. Are there any trends, that we should be embracing or opposing? Do you know of any data sources that we could access to, have a clear understanding of what's going on in our field? Are there any specific research areas or topics that you all would find useful regarding business teacher prep? And then at the very end, we'll have a discussion related to whether or not our organization should really invest in updating the standards for business teacher education, or should we go in a different direction? So those are just some questions to ponder, but at this point, I'll ask Joe to give us an update on what he would like to speak with us about today.
Yeah, I would like just to go through some very general, data on teacher credentialing. As you know, education, teaching and education, and the data about business education is incredibly small. I can barely find any information on business ed. In fact, if there's one takeaway that I've taken away from my research over the last 4 years in business ed, is that we need to somehow lobby the federal government in some regard to help us with this. We need to go to the Department of Education. We need to go to the National Center for Educational Research and Statistics. We need to be able to lobby them in some capacity to be able to gain additional clarity into our professions, because frankly, there's not nearly as much out there as we need. Tonight, I want to share with you some general credentialing information about the trends in teacher prep programs, and we should be able to extrapolate from that, even though we know that's not the best way to do it. Hopefully that it'd be at least a way for us to gather some data about what's happening in teacher credentialing programs. The majority of the information I have tonight is going to come from this website, and you can take a look at that report. I've cut some of the most interesting things that I would think that would be most pertinent to you, a business education teacher prep audience. And so let's go ahead and begin looking at some general data. I'm going to go through these quickly. I will make these available. If not all of these, I will give you the links to all these reports. You don't need this PowerPoint. I've kind of pulled this out just to emphasize a few things. So without further ado, let's go through that very quickly. Number one, these are the number of individuals enrolled in teacher preparation programs by program, and this has been since 2012 to 2019. So you can see that you're going to see these numbers over and over. Traditional programs are institutional programs that would be traditional, like a traditional teacher prep program in an institution of higher learning. An alternative IHE stands for Institution of Higher Education. So in this case, it would be an alternative program that's in an institution of higher learning, or as you would see here with this green line, you have alternative non-institutional higher learning. Like Christina, would you consider your program a traditional program or an alternative IHE program?
I mean, I guess I would probably consider the internship an alternative, even though they have to do classes. You know, it's different in that they don't have any required classes to be able to start teaching.
Got it. So these are, yeah, exactly. I think that's right. I think I went through probably a traditional teacher prep program where I didn't get a master's degree. I'd gotten a bachelor's degree, and then I took an extra year to get all the teacher education courses that I had to take. Took me a year to do that. And I didn't get a master's from it. I had to go get that extra, but that was fine. Now here is the percentage or change in number of individuals enrolled in teacher preparation programs. And so if you're looking to target research in specific areas of the country, for example, Texas seems to be one of the most extreme states when it comes to the number of individuals enrolled in teacher prep. As a matter of fact, you can look here, and when you talk about the percentage or change in number of individuals enrolled in these programs, you can see a vast majority of the country is in the red category or the pinkish here, which means a negative or decline, especially where the big population centers are here in the Northeast. You can see what we're looking at. Now, keep in mind, this is for all teachers. This is not just for business teachers. But we have to extrapolate from this because we have no data that would isolate what we do in the business area down to this. We do have CTE, but then even CTE lumps us in with non-business programs like welding and nursing and auto body and auto mechanics and things like that. That really kind of muddy the water when you combine those with business ed. The next graph would show you the percentage of teacher prep programs where students who are enrolled in alternative non-institute of higher education programs by state. So when you look again, if you look at the states, it's probably growing the fastest in regard to these alternative non-higher education programs. You're looking at state of Texas, and then you have some of these fringe states here that are doing different, well, not fringe, but a lot of the Western states you'll see are continually in the increasing number as far as trying innovative things, it seems. Also too, depending on where your state is, you may be increasing or you may be decreasing, it just depends. So let's look at another statistic. Now, this is an interesting part, a percentage of teacher preparation program enrollees by gender. This is also fascinating. You know, there's, the student population is about 50-50, 51 male, 48 female. But then if you look at the teaching divide, and even in NBEA is really more exacerbated. NBEA's membership is around 80-20, about 80% female, 20% male. And you can see here that proportionally to the students, there's a mismatch. Now, we only report this, and I think this was reported in this report to also talk about the general socioeconomic and different. I know Carla Sager and Some others did a presentation a while back and revealed, I think, the same research that talked about also too, that there's evidence that shows that if students of a particular race usually can perform better when they're taught by a teacher of that same race. So that really doesn't have much to do with gender, but it does have to do with general teaching trends and who are becoming teachers and some of the challenges we have there. Now, this is from a different site. This is from the National Center for Education Statistics, and I'm going to put a link to this research right here, and I'm going to send you up. After I post this, you'll have all the data. Here we go. We'll have all the data that I use for this small presentation tonight. But what we did is we looked at the number of associate's degrees conferred by degree-granting post-secondary institutions in the fields of study. What I wanted to do is get an idea of where business was compared to other topics. Because, you know, if business courses are going down post-secondary, especially at this junior college maybe level, when you're granting associate's degrees, I thought there might be something there. So if you look at the number of degrees conferred by degree granting institution, you'll see business is actually lost about not quite 50,000, but we've declined over the last decade. And you can see here that the health professions have also declined. So actually, they're about flat. And then really what's really grown, which is surprising to me, I would have thought the health professions and related programs would have just skyrocketed, but they haven't. Liberal arts and sciences, general studies and humanities has grown substantially. I don't know if that's our kids don't know what they want to do in life, so they go with general studies or something like that. I don't really know. But then you look down here at computer information science, computer and information sciences and support services, which is close to business. And you see that is also flat over the last 10 years, which I find amazing. So there's some things here that I'm not sure what they mean exactly or the implications, but I think they're fascinating to look at, because business essentially has not grown. It's decreased over the last 10 years, at least in college and or at least in the associate's degree granting programs. So if we look here too, a number of individuals who completed. Now, the other one was the number of students who enrolled. And so this is the number of students that actually completed programs. And you can see that the number of traditional students has gone substantially down, almost probably 75,000, something like that, maybe 50 over the last 10 years. We have and then the alternative programs and the alternative higher educational organizations, or their alternative higher ed institutions, they've slightly increased in the last 5 years, but not terribly much. So that's some fascinating information as well. The alternative non-programs have generally stayed flat. Usually I would have thought, and what I've heard from others, well, those were the areas that were growing. But from what I'm seeing, the number of individuals who complete it, not so much. I don't see these big trends here, which I think is fascinating. The alternative institutes of higher educational typical programs have grown the most. So that's good news for people like maybe like Christina, who have alternative programs. But because I'll tell you this, when we look at the criteria for these two and what's required, I can tell you the alternative institutes of higher education have, in my view, stronger programs. Christina, in other words, you have a whole lot of stakeholders that hold you accountable. You have accreditation, typically, and I will tell you the alternative non-institutes of higher education, you're going to see in a few minutes the differences between those, which is fascinating, and what the criteria is for students. And I've highlighted some of the biggest differences between these two programs in regard to what's required for teachers. They're filled full of debatable factors. And we'll look at that in a couple minutes. Here's the percentage of change in number of individuals who completed teacher prep programs. And if you just look at that, I mean, it's sobering for teachers. So this was the number of change, and you can see that the vast majority here have gone in decline. And, you know, again, just to restate, business education's in this. It's not just it's not just business. Percent of teacher prep program completers who enrolled in alternative non-Institute of Higher Education programs by state. So if you can look here, most of these programs in green have actually grown, because these are the organizations, the alternative non-Institute of Higher Learning. So Christina, these would not be organizations like yours. These would be non-Institutes of Higher Learning. So you can see that in these states, I would look again, probably Louisiana, Florida, Idaho, Texas, maybe some of these others that have some place in that area there will probably represent the highest change in those who completed those programs and what those programs would contain. Here's the essentially the fact here when you look at the teachers by race, and you can see that what we need we're not getting almost by 100% on both sides. So for example, Black or African American teachers, we need we need 15 percentage points of the teachers, and we have 6.9 applying, are coming in there. And again, that goes back to Carla Sager's report she did for Jarby, and some of those. She did a webinar. It's actually recorded in our library about ideas and how to gain minority teachers in your institution. She gives ideas, and she had a whole webinar, and then I thought was outstanding. If any of you look for that, you can Google Carla Sager, and her name will pop up on that webinar. But essentially, the country's not getting what they need in regard to if they're going to match the socioeconomic or the socio-demographic racial components from students to teachers, if they were to do that. So anyway, that's something to look at here. Now, here's another area: the number of individuals who had prepared to teach in selected subject area expert. Now, this is where I get a little upset with the federal government, because business is nowhere in here, especially for the high school level. So when you come down here, these are teachers who teach by specialty. So if you look, elementary ed is by far and away the largest subset, if you will, for teachers. But then, the closest thing that we could get to business would be computer science. And if you see here, there are only, the numbers are staggeringly low. Now, how many other students? Again, business isn't even listed, so it's hard to be able to know. But if computer science is here, I'm not sure where business would be, but it's not going to be much higher or lower. It's not going to be up here, unfortunately. So this is, again, fascinating to look at. Next, teacher preparation. Now, these are the number of providers, the number of teacher preparation providers by program. So you can see here that these numbers have stayed generally flat over the last 10 years. There have been some growth in the alternative Institute of Higher Educational programs, kind of like Christina's. You can see those have risen maybe by 50 or so institutions over the last 10 years. Alternative have stayed pretty much, alternative non-Institute of Higher Learning have stayed about where they have been for the last 10 years as well. So really, these, in my view, I think that these programs have grown because of these programs, in my view, have more rigor. Any alternative Institute of Higher Educational program, again, usually comes from an Institute of Higher Learning, and they have other standards to follow. And I think that these programs are generally more attractive. These may be more questionable. Research may not be as prevalent on the effectiveness of these programs. But there again, that's a supposition on my part. I can tell you, I'm not saying one is superior to the other. I'm saying that it looks to me as if these programs have grown is because more people have invested and perhaps more, the programs have, there's less guesswork around the effectiveness of an alternative program in institutes of higher education. Number of teacher preparation programs, and we're just about, I've got, let's see, a few more slides here. We'll cruise through these. Again, some more teacher prep programs by year, number of teacher prep programs. You can see here, 18 and 19, from some pretty serious declines here. You can see this is the most fascinating information here, I think. This is the percentage of graduate level teacher prep programs that have selected entry requirements. So if you're going to go into a program like Christina's or any others of those of you who are represented here tonight, you have all programs, traditional programs, you have alternative, and then you have alternative not Institute of Higher Education. So you have these three categories here, and let's take a look at a couple of these. And I just highlighted for you in yellow some of the biggest differences between these programs. So for example, in traditional programs, 47.6% of those programs had a minimum GPA requirement in traditional programs. If you go to alternative, not institution of higher education based, it's only 22.4%. You can see a pretty dramatic drop in the standard for teachers in regard, or potential teachers in the regard to minimum GPA and professional education coursework. Also, too, the subject area or academic content. So in other words, if I'm going to teach accounting, I need to come with some coursework in regard to some practical coursework in regard to other experience I've had that's verifiable in the subject area. I find it interesting that 45% of traditional schools would focus on that, where 82%. So here you can see a lot more credit or viability is given to what the person has done in life, perhaps as opposed to their academic credentials. In the institutes of higher learning, 68% employ and look to this type of activity in the classrooms. Now, this one's really interesting as well. You know, I've got a few feelings about this one. Traditional programs lean on interviews about 51% of the 51.6% of the time. Now check this out. In alternative, not institutional or higher based educational program, teacher prep programs, 75% of those programs depend on interviews of some sort. I think that's fascinating. Because frankly, I can tell you that there's a trend across corporate recruiters today to not even ask for references because they always come back positive. You can have an axe murderer find two people to say that they're a good person or that they're capable to do the job. And frankly, they don't even call. It's a trend. And now I'm not saying that across the board, but it's certainly, I've seen that, I've heard that. And definitely this appears to show here that we see some leaning on interviews, a lot less. Now here's some other, the percentage of, these are exit requirements from these programs compared. So when you look here, like the minimum number of course credit semester hours completed, 91.7% in traditional programs, only 72% in alternative non-higher education based courses. Big difference in GPA, a minimum GPA, 90% of courses. Christina, do you guys have minimum GPA requirements? Yeah, so
we do because Pennsylvania does. Pennsylvania.
There you go, and there's your states, and your state requires that. But look here, in the alternative, not institution of higher education, only 29% of those programs focus on minimum GPA in the content area. Finally, this is kind of scary too. This is the coursework for professional education. If you're going to be an accountant, you have to focus on accounting courses, right? You would think. But in this case, in traditional programs, 82% focus on that. I have that as a priority, where only 35% of these alternative non-institution or of higher education-based learning programs come from, and what they incorporate. So that you can see the quality difference in those, and there again, as far as does it really matter in regard to the effectiveness, you want to, if I had the money, I would fund research on which one of these is most effective and which of them is most timely and which ones produces the best teachers or satisfaction. Recommendations, this is another thing. 60% of these non-alternative programs, 60% look for recommendations and use those in their program, where only 27%, almost less than half, of these institutions use recommendations. Again, you can find somebody to say almost anything about you. So here's the critical questions that I walked away from, and I hope some of that is useful as you teach your own programs. Number one, we need to research how many business teachers there are in the country. So our best guess, there's 1.9 million secondary teachers in the country, in the United States. If 1% of those are business teachers, it's about 19,000 business teachers. That's our estimate. Now, what we might do, and I'll have to lean on statistical experts, maybe and some of our academics like Christina and others, to lean on, if we polled our audience and said, how many teachers do you have in your school and what percent are business educators? And we got a really good sample. And then we did some type of analysis to choose, well, the average person from the review, 2% of the teachers were business teachers, or 1% or 0.5. We could come up with some average to extrapolate that data from to come easier. Whether or not we could do that and it come out to be right, I don't know. But for post-secondary business educators, the Bureau of Labor Statistics says there's 78,410. These are your business teachers in colleges and universities. So CBTR actually has, who's hosting this tonight, it actually has the larger audience, perhaps, of our, even though it's a small segment, our post-secondary people are only about 20% of the NBA audience, where there's actually a bigger pool, but it's also more highly served because there's an association for everything in higher ed. There's an association for marketing, there's association for communications, there's association for human resources, there's an association for all those international business, and their big associations. The Association for International Business has over 3,000 members. And that's just in that one vertical. So fascinating. Why doesn't the government have better data on business teachers? And we're almost completely ignored or lumped in with CTE. I think business education is the most neglected, the most omitted topic or vertical in the entire educational United States topic system, if you will. We know how many math teachers there are. That's easy. We know how many English teachers there are. We know how many history teachers are. We have no clue really, other than to go through these extrapolations of how many business teachers there are. And I think that's something that needs to change if we're going to measure the effectiveness of what we're doing and we try to promote and advocate for it. That's probably one of the things that shackled NBEA in not being able to advocate more, because we don't have those numbers. Wouldn't it be nice? And again, it might be something that we should approach some of these federal agencies about. This is another one. CTE is not business education, but it's often categorized as such. So many of our potential members are essentially cubbyholed or forced to go into an ACTE related group, and there's nothing wrong with ACTE, but it's not business education. They have a business education division, but how effective they are could be debatable. There's just far more focus with an organization like NBEA. But regardless, those are some of the things that we took out, and that we're saying that and this should have been covered in advocacy years ago by NBEA to advocate more, but that ship has sailed. And do we have any data on reveals how effective secondary business education is, so that on which we can base our advocacy? How effective is an accounting course in high school? Some people say it's not effective, you don't need it, they can do it in college. Well, how effective is that? I would love to see NBEA fund research that looks at the effectiveness of these courses and the ROI for society or for the student who decides to invest time in business courses. And then as they move ahead, they are able to, we can use that. Is there ROI or isn't there ROI? We have to be prepared for the good news and the bad news, frankly. So anyway, so that's my presentation. Again, if you look at those two reports and the links, you will have ongoing, you'll have more there than you can assimilate, but at least that gives you some idea of what's happening in teacher prep programs as far as we're concerned. And it maybe, at least gives us a basis on which questions we need to ask more. That's really why we're here tonight, is to just, we shouldn't, hold up our hands and say, well, what are we supposed to do? What leadership role does the National Business Education have in business education? What's our national leadership role? which congressman do we need to write, or which agencies do we need to approach to better our profession and to have a better take and handle on these things that we've discussed tonight, including teacher prep. So anyway, Pamela, that's my part, and thanks for allowing me to share that.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing all of that, Joe. Really appreciate it. Very insightful. And I was just going to, before we get into those questions, I was going to give you all kind of an overview of some of the things that I saw when I was going through the demise of the business education programs in various states and a lot of my colleagues. And so a lot of the reasons, and you all may know more, but I know in our areas, a lot of the reasons that the program started breaking down, for one, it was hard to finish them in 4 years. A lot of the curriculum were really 5-year programs, and a lot of people now want expedited programs, and so a lot of people are saying, well, it's taking too long to finish, so we need something faster, and that's hard to do with true teacher prep programs. The technology is moving so quickly, and the state rules change, and the credentialing on the state levels change so fast that the institutions couldn't keep up. So if you've ever been on curriculum committees, you know how UCC, it's a cycle, and it takes long to get things changed in higher ed. And a lot of the state departments were saying, we need something that moves faster. And the teacher ed programs just don't move fast enough in getting things changed and updated. So that was an issue. Undergraduate students in most states, do not get paid for student teaching. The Masters of Arts and Teaching programs, they get paid. A lot of the alternative programs, they get paid. But people who are going through traditional programs and getting the most training on that undergraduate level, they're expected to student teach for an entire semester with no pay. And so that was an issue, especially in this day and age. We already talked about the GPA requirements. We had very, very high expectations for our teacher ed students. And so that was an issue. And if they got behind, then, the numbers dropped. The Praxis Core, when they updated the Praxis Core, we had several students who could not pass it. And so if you have the majority of your students who can't pass that entry-level Praxis, your program is in a bind, because what do? You keep having them taking classes, but they can't complete until they pass that test. And so that was a huge issue. Sometimes the colleges of business and colleges of education could not communicate well with one another. And you really need both to talk to each other in order to have a strong business ed program on the undergraduate level. And a lot of that is because we have different accrediting bodies, and they have different expectations and different requirements. So that was an issue. Another thing, textbooks cost more for business ed students. A lot of people forget about that. One book could be $500. And you have a lot of other programs that are going to open source books or teacher created things that are free. But the business ed students really had many expensive books that they had to purchase, and a lot of prereqs as well. And so those are just a few things that I know kind of, contributed to us having to struggle. And so now that we know that we're in that predicament, the organization, we just want to figure out a way to still remain relevant and still be our greatest advocates. And like Joe said, we have not been recognized on the national level as a true, subject area. And I think it's time for us to become such, especially since everybody's saying personal finance is so important and everything else related to business is so important. And so now, just like people push for computer science to be standalone, I think it's time for us to push for business ed to be standalone and be recognized on every level, especially, 7 through 12. And so those are just some things I wanted to discuss, and I'm going to show you all the questions if I can share my screen, and we'll go through those quickly. But I do want you all to be as honest and open as possible. If you have any feedback on any of this, because the goal is to see where we should stand when it comes to credentialing, because as Joe said, there's so many different ways to do it, but a lot of states are looking for people to help them in our area, okay? Because the institutions are taking their hands off, many are. Some would if they had a little more guidance, but and so I think we have a strong say-so in that area. So what indicators or factors do you see happening in business ed teacher prep programs that we should be aware of? So do you all see anything else happening that has not already been discussed? Anybody know of anything that we have not discussed that we should discuss? Okay, so maybe we covered those. The second question was, how should NBEA embrace or oppose trends in business ed teacher prep? So are there any things you've been seeing that have been going well, or things that you've seen that are not so well? And you think we should take a stance either way? Anybody have any feedback?
Pam, this is Benita.
Okay.
I would say we have to embrace the non-traditional programs. I know there's always been a lot of resistance because those of us who went through traditional programs felt that we got a better education and were better prepared. And I won't necessarily argue that. But one of the positives for the non-traditional that I've seen in Georgia is the mentoring. Each of the students are assigned a mentor. Now, this is not just business ed. This is any area. So, but I think we have to embrace them and try to include them instead of feel like we're better than them.
I absolutely agree. And thank you for mentioning that. And so that's the second time that the mentorship idea has come up tonight. So I think that's something we definitely need to look into. Thank you for that, Benita. I appreciate that. Did anybody else have any?
One thing in Pennsylvania, Temple particularly, is we're beginning to investigate other ways of meeting competencies to match up with the course competencies, right? But our teachers most of my teachers are all going through a graduate level program. They're teaching and then they're going through the grad level program. And so they're meeting some competencies in their own classroom, right? That we're really, I'm starting a project in January, digging into what are they meeting? How else can we give them credit for it besides them taking a class? So I think you're going to see more of those competency-based programs.
Absolutely, I agree with you. I know that's a big deal here in Texas now. Actually, our state board will take, if you have worked in a business, they'll count that as, part of your competency. And so I think you're absolutely right. So I'll be interested in seeing how you all, come
Yeah,
out.
I'm talking about education competencies.
Yeah,
education course competencies. Yeah.
Yeah, they do a combination. That's what I was saying. Here in Texas, they do a combination of the education that you have, whether it's undergrad or graduate level, and then they couple it with your work experience too. Thank you for that.
In order to answer that question, does anyone know how many business teacher education programs that we could classify as traditional exist right now? There's one at Bloomsburg. I believe there's one at Auburn. There's certainly one at Whitewater. But are there any other ones? And by traditional, I would think that would mean at least one methods course in business subjects. Do those, I know those three schools I mentioned do it, but are there any others?
Illinois State has a program, but it's very, very, very small.
Where's that, Barbara?
Illinois State.
Oh.
Temple University has one.
Okay.
Again, it's small, but we're not closing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's really only a handful of programs. So that means, by default, it seems like NBEA should be, and I think they are definitely doing this. I marvel at the extent that they are doing it. They are addressing the needs of people that are going through non-traditional programs.
Right. So yeah, but that's something that I would definitely like to confirm how many we have left. I think I heard you all name 5 tonight. So we'll definitely get a number on that.
This has something to do with those questions that Joe put up too. A couple weeks ago, Robert Mitchell and I went to Ball State University to visit our good friend Betty Brown, who's also a friend of Benita's and Barbara's and several other people here. She's unable to travel because of health reasons, so we wanted to visit her. And it was my first time on the Ball State campus, which, as many of you know, that had an enormous business teacher education program at both the graduate and undergraduate levels at one time. It was one of the largest in America. Well, they really don't have anything now save for a graduate program in CTE, which business teachers, people that want to teach business subjects, could go into. And Betty made this comment to us, and it was so truthful. She said, but business education is not CTE today. You know, at one time, it was to a great extent because high school programs prepared people to be stenographers and bookkeepers and in positions like that. But that's no longer the case. So to say it's CTE is really not correct. It's certainly, at the least, a misnomer. So, you know, Betty made that comment. I said, and, you know, that's her institution. She's been retired for a number of years now, but nevertheless, she was, you know, skeptical about that.
Yeah, and I think the reason why I think we're just going to have to embrace being grouped with CTE is because the high schools and the school districts, that's the only way they can get funding for it. And so in order to get that Perkins funding, business has to be classified as CTE.
Yeah,
and so
yeah.
Yeah, so other than that, they wouldn't offer it at all. And so, so that's the main issue, is all tied to funding. And so, you know, like I said, I think pushing it on a federal level, maybe we can one day be, you know, standalone and strong and really be bagged by some of these big banks and the feds. I think that would be amazing. I think it's possible because I watched it happen with computer science, like right before my eyes. And so I think it's possible, but currently, that's really the deal with CTE. Without that Perkins funding, the business programs won't be funded.
Yeah, I think that's really true. Yeah, I'm going to the ACTE convention in Phoenix in a couple of weeks, and 2 nights ago I went through their extensive program, session by session, and you know, a lot of those sessions that are billed as business ed are not CTE per se. There's a lot on personal finance and entrepreneurship and things like that. You know, I may not go to those sessions, but nevertheless, they're out there. So they have changed that focus to a great extent.
Yeah. Thank you so much for sharing that, Peter, and have fun in Phoenix.
Oh, I will.
Good deal. So do any of you know of any data sources that we should be accessing? Like Joe was able to find us some information. Anybody know of any other places we should be looking to pull things from to try to get a better understanding? No? Okay. And are there any research areas or topics that you all would find useful? I know I just wrote something down about the different programs, you know, knowing how many types of programs we have as far as the traditional programs. And also, I think I got from Joe, you know, students who took high school business classes, you know, how do they end up in life? You know, are they more successful? Because I know that was the foundation of my career. If I wouldn't have been in this field if it were not for my high school courses, so I would be interested in and doing it on a larger scale and just seeing, you know, if business classes in high school have impacted people on a massive level. So, any other research areas or topics that you all would find useful? Okay, and this is the big one. Joe and I have had several conversations about this, and we would love your sincere input. If you can notice that graphic on the end, for years we have had business teacher education, curriculum guides, and program standards. And so basically that document helped guide all of us in our methods classes on what to do, what not to do, what all was needed. And so being that we have so few traditional programs left, Is it worthwhile for MBEA to invest in updating these standards? And if so, should we be focusing on the institutions of higher education, or should we go another route and provide standards that could also be used in non-traditional formats? Or should we seek to do something else? So we would just love your input to know, on a national level, when it comes to the standards for business teacher education, what role do you think MBEA should be playing right now?
Well, I know in my program at Temple University that we use the standards. When they're writing, in my classes, when they write lesson plans, unit plans, project-based learning plans, they always have to include our standards, MBA standards. All right. A review for them to be updated might be good. But I know that I don't want them to go anywhere. It helps me enforce the need for them to be involved with MBEA. Them having to use the standards, I know that it helps them, even guides them where Pennsylvania standards can be a little tricky at times. So it helps provide that path for them. So I can't say that I can answer that question right now, other than I don't want them to go anywhere because I use them.
Keep in mind that NBA has two sets of standards. One set is a curriculum for business education, so it's the 10 different topic areas that what students need to be able to know and do in business. And the one that we're here is almost exclusively used in teacher prep programs. Do you guys use this one then? This set of standards for your teacher prep program?
No, this curriculum guide.
Yes.
No, that is.
I think you're probably
I
was thinking you're referencing the curriculum standards for what students should be able to do, which we appreciate. Yeah, that's not going anywhere for sure. That's one of our most popular publications. Yeah. This one is used specifically for institutions of higher learning that have teacher prep programs, and it's really like it's standards for those programs. So it covers things like standards for preparatory programs, their governance, general education requirements, research, faculty, admission to business teacher education, student retention, student support services. These are all things that a good teacher prep program should have. Consider it something like an NCATE for business. Yeah. So I think that's what these are. So the question is, do we invest? Which would be about, if a school used these, we'd love to have an underwriter for these standards, because it would cost us quite a bit to have this done, because volunteers can certainly serve on a once-off committee or advisory board or something like that, but they're not going to get in and do the hard work. And we have to hire that done. And so we're struggling right now with whether or not we continue to publish this standard for as few business teacher prep programs as exist. So we're just looking.
I joke. Oh. Sorry, this is Lori. I thought you were done speaking. I'm currently teaching a business methods class right now, so I can speak a little to that. I think each universities are so streamlined now on their requirements that this particular the curriculum standards is just it's a little too vague to meet, or too generic, maybe I should say, to meet each individual university's standards, requirements. Honestly, if speaking as a business methods teacher, I've been having my student go to the NBEA website more often than I thought I would. Instead of a textbook, they have to get the membership. And the library of the pre-recorded webinars like this one, I've been having him go back and listen to the experts. And then we talk about it and we discuss that. I've been having him go into the lesson plan vaults, and I've been having him go in the standards and then write his own lesson plan. So I think the resources that we are giving teachers on our website at the moment is sufficient to replace that curriculum guide.
Yeah, I that's good data. I just put a link in. So some of you aren't familiar with that business teacher education curriculum guide and program standards, it's really for teacher prep programs. And so I agree with you. I mean, I think this packages it up nice. And if we had plenty of programs, I just can't. I think we need to make sure that I don't even know. I've had only a few people say they use these. So that's what we don't want to spend, $25,000 to pre-produce this for only a few schools, unless one of those schools wants to underwrite the effort.
It seems like a lot of that too is irrelevant at this point in time. And it would seem that time could be spent more effectively if there were only 5 programs, for example, in America. There could be a representative from each of those universities that could have a couple of Zoom sessions and update it to meet their own needs. But as far as spending money and an extraordinary amount of time on it, it doesn't seem like it's worthwhile.
Well, I know it's a good product, but is it needed anymore is the issue. I think it's outstanding. When I look at it, I see it addressing professionalism, curriculum development, instruction, assessment, classroom environment, student organizations, professional communication, stakeholders, career development, subject competencies, and so on. But like you say, is it deep enough, which we would have to update it? And then is it in need? So I don't think there's a question of the quality as much as there is of the need.
So I know in Pennsylvania, we are so governed by the state of what we have to have in our programs, and then being audited every 7 years for that. There would be no way that I could bring anything like that into Temple and Temple say, oh yeah, we will use this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That makes sense.
And that's great feedback, great from all of you, especially you, Peter, like you said, reaching out to those institutions and seeing if it's something that they need, just if they can review it and see if it's something that they need, but on a massive scale. All your feedback has been very helpful. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. At this time, do any of you have any other comments or points to be clarified or questions about MBEA or CBTR?